right, guys, welcome back to Total Disclosure, and we are tonight down the rabbit hole. Well, actually, it's midday here in the United States, but with the UFO topic and interviews, a lot of them, which I love, come from the UK. You know, a lot of people in the UK are super into this, phenomenon, and it's so fun to get to talk to those guys and gals and everyone in between, because they're so knowledgeable and I think some of the most credible stories and witnesses and researchers have come out of that that area of the world. So, with that being said, we want to say thank you to all of our UK viewers across the pond, as well as here in the United States. I'm leaving for Catalina Island tomorrow. I'm super excited. Get that short film on the road. Catalina Island, a UFO journey. Kevin Day has already filmed scenes, and it's been so amazing. Guys, before we get into it today, make sure to like, share, subscribe. If you want to help support the channel further, become a member. Everything goes back into the channel, allows us to keep doing things like interviews and short films and you name it. So, and there's much more to come. Today, I'm joined by a frequent flyer at this point, and now kind of officially part of the team, Mr. Thomas, Atomic Thomas, Cortex Zero. What's going on, brother?
What's up, Ty? Thanks for having me here, man. I'm super excited for this one. This is gonna make my day, my whole week.
Yeah, and guess what? The guest showed up.
Yeah.
Shout out Stephen Bassett.
I've been talking to Stephen today.
Yeah, he didn't even show up. No, I'm just kidding. He had an emergency, and we're rescheduled for the last Sunday of the month. But it's just such an awkward, such an awkward day. So anyway, he didn't show up. But the guest of honor from the Disclosure team, part of Phenomenology, and the new season of Phenomenology, season 2, is coming out very soon, and we'll have him to talk about it with Vinnie Adams. What is going on, my brother? Let me get everyone in place and everything out of the way there. What's up, man?
Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm looking forward to a really good conversation.
Yeah, and listen, I've been following you since most, I started doing movie and television podcasts, in 2019, 2020, and I've always been interested in UFOs and always kept my eye on the UFO subject, because I had my own sighting when I was younger. I just never really publicly came out, but I was always keeping up to date with guys like you, who are consistently feeding information to the public, that sometimes otherwise wouldn't get out. And shout out to guys like Andy and Dan on that UFO podcast. Need to Know, Ross Coulthart. Like the community has grown so big, and you've been such a big part of that. So, hands off, clap to you.
Thank you, man. I really
if I had a sound bite, I would do it. Like the, So no. So thank you. But I guess for starters, how did you get into all this stuff? How did UAP and UFO really take over your life, in the sense of this is what you were gonna do, this is your passion?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, like a lot of people growing up, I was, a big science fiction fan. It was just, they were my go-to movies, and TV series were always sort of space, alien, all those kind of weird and wonderful sci-fi movies. And then, I suppose in my 20s, I kind of discovered the esoteric. So I was just jumping between different weird and wonderful topics, let's say. And of course, you always come around and discover the UFO subject when you're looking at that kind of thing.
It's so about around the corner. Yeah.
It's always there, just waiting for you, So I think it's about 13 years ago, there'd been a major data dump of files over here from the Ministry of Defense, declassified. So
right.
I was watching a lot of UFO documentaries, and always coming away with more questions, just saying, I need more, I want more, I need to find out, what I can do for this subject myself. And so I was spending many, many late nights just trawling through declassified documents, like I said, the Ministry of Defense, but then jumping across to, US files from all decades, with Blue Book right the way up to the more modern day sort of FBI data dumps and stuff. So for many, many years I was doing that. And it was only when, we had this global health crisis, let's call it, not too long ago, that we were all stuck at home, and I decided to sort of amp it up a bit more and jump onto social media and start becoming more of a public face talking about it. And it's been nonstop since then, and here we are today.
Here we are today, yeah. And you have a great series that you did, a phenomenology. Now, how did that come about, and what went into the the work up to it?
It's a great question. So my good friend, Mr. Ashley Cowie, he's an experienced kind of explorer,
Right.
and not just of the many mysteries.
And to interject, because I want to make it clear, going from producing content on YouTube and being a voice in the community to making a TV series is a huge jump, right? Or to make a series like this is a big jump. So a lot goes into it. And I don't think a lot of people truly understand that. But to make something, very, very low budget, it takes so much time. And not saying you're low budget, by the way, just saying, like, even what I'm doing is super low budget. And, so much time and effort and willpower goes into these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Ashley approached me about the phenomenon that he witnesses, he now lives in Colombia. He's actually from Scotland, but he lives in this rural valley, in front of this mountain. And this is where these mysterious lights have been reportedly seen it's on record for at least 400 years. And when he approached me to sort of say, I'd love to put together a team to come out here and make a documentary initially, it was never going to be a series. And I was like, I'm up for it straight away. And it eventually, it happened last February. We flew out a really eclectic mix of people to investigate, not just the light phenomenon on the mountain, but speak to locals, and look into the culture that surrounds the phenomena in that area, because it's completely different. There's no stigma or taboo over there. It's talked about in everyday life, and it was just fascinating to learn about the culture, and and then at the same time try and investigate this light phenomena, which we were lucky enough to capture on film as part of the series. And so, but just to your point about the work that goes into it as well, I was lucky enough to have a lot of input with the end product, but it all comes down to Ashley's incredible editing skills, the hours he put in. But then we had a wonderful composer doing the music. We had people doing post-production on the lighting, and just everything. It was a great team of people, and we couldn't have done it without all of them just coming together.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And
sounds incredible.
And the project turned out amazing, and it even warranted a second run. So you always got to be happy about something like that. And you said that, so a little tidbit maybe about season 2. When could people expect something like that?
So we're going to do a weekly release again for the episodes. We're trying to aim for the start of July. I'm actually going to be in Roswell, New Mexico at the end of June, start of July. And we're hoping to premiere episode 1 at the conference, the Roswell Incident Conference. So that's kind of the starting point. And then hopefully it'll be weekly episodes after that, if all goes to plan.
I'm definitely I was definitely interested in going to that as well. So that would be really fun to meet up and say hello.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure Tom has some questions as well, but back to your thoughts. Obviously the UFO, I'm still calling it the UFO report. The UAP report is obviously at the front and center of UFO Twitter right now. It's being talked about because a lot of people are divided on this report, and I think that was always going to be the case. I'd like to talk about the report, to a degree.
Sure.
But what are your thoughts on what came out and what you're seeing from the unclassified version?
I mean, I always keep my expectations low when it comes to actual information about the objects themselves and the things that we all really want to know, the really juicy information. I mean, I knew that none of that was really going to be released. And following the subject so closely when it comes to the government in the last few years, where we've had, this is the third iteration of a task force set out to look at this. So we've had the UAP task force, we've had the AOI MSG group, now Arrow group, and You know, the director, Sean Kirkpatrick, has only been in the role, you know, less than a year.
Less than a year, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and obviously with a limited team, we were seeing job advertisements popping up towards the end of last year for roles in the organization. So it's clear that they didn't have a big team. They must have been utilizing some kind of external science and analysts to kind of look at these cases, and, you know, then trying to throw it all into a report to meet the mandate of Congress is a lot of work to do in quite a short amount of time. And so I think what the UAP report shows to me is that it shows the processes and procedures going forward about how they're going to look at this even more. And, you know, that report is really was based on the language we saw in the NDAA last year.
2021,
Since then we've had the new NDAA, which mandates even more. So we have another report due out at the end of June. So let's see if that reaches, you know, the levels that they're expected to reach from what Congress are asking of them. We'll see.
Now, so 510 reports were totaled. Now, this included the 119 that were submitted after the preliminary. I think if what I was getting out of it is, so the preliminary 17 years.
Yeah.
Apparently these 119 didn't get in there in that time frame, but were added in, you know, like an addendum. So 510 total, no collisions. They did have some solutions, but not, they weren't concrete. They didn't say that this was 100% accurately, you know, solved. They, you know, claiming deflated balloon-like substances, and stuff. So what, and there was still a heavy implication that this could all be foreign adversary technology. So, you know, where do you stand on that side of things? Do you think that it's a waste of time when we start talking about, you know, could this be China or Russia?
I mean, from conversations I've had and from statements we've seen publicly, you know, people are really ruling that out. And as much as I don't know, I can't rule it out 100%. So, but, you know, and when you're saying there about the different, they're breaking down the numbers in this report and they're characterizing some of these incidents, but then they caveat that underneath by saying characterized does not mean resolved.
Right.
And then a certain amount of these cases are demonstrating unusual flight characteristics and performance capabilities. And that's quite telling that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And so for me, I'll keep everything on the table until it's off, you know?
And here's my thought on this. Like you had already said, the UAP report was never going to be an instantly gratifying thing, right? Especially year 1, year 2, and potentially year 3. It was going to be a multi-year collection of data that was going to lead to answers. Of course, you know, data. That's just we needed to collect and analyze, catalog, and go through these things over a long period of time with one office, not 4 different offices, you know, subsequent of each other. You know, it's like picking up after each other. We can't keep doing that. It needs to be one office. So, you know, this report is the first from Arrow, if you will. So again, next year will be the year 2 from Arrow. And I really feel like it won't be till year 3 from Arrow that we even start to talk about, you know, the real juicier stuff, reverse, you know, crash retrieval programs, etc. And that might even be pushing it.
Yeah, and I think what's worth pointing out is that when we see this report, we had the 2021 preliminary assessment, is around those times we saw a lot of congressmen and representatives coming out and talking on mainstream media, you know, on Fox News, CNN, and we've seen it in the last day. You know, we've had Representative Andre Carson, we've had Tim Burchett, we've had who else was there? There's been loads of them talking, and they're all saying, you know, very interesting things that can be taken in different ways. But, you know, all it takes is for one of these conversations to be had on mainstream media, and it, you know, something like slip and just putting all these pieces together, it tells a bigger picture and a bigger story for me. So it's all adding up and pushing the subject forward, in my opinion. A lot of people don't see it that way. I respect that. That's fine. We're all allowed to look at things differently. So, yeah, I think, again, it's like you said, let's wait till year 2, year 3, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say till I push it to Tom is, this was always going to be a multi-year thing, always, and I think a lot of us knew that from the jump. But there are a lot of people who are expecting answers right away, and the government has never been an entity to do such a thing. So it was always going to be a process, but these are the dominoes that always needed to fall. Now, I see this as a necessary, quote unquote, evil, not necessarily evil, but maybe a necessary boredom for now, because it's taking the steps in the right direction, right? These are 10 years ago, to even think we'd be here right now would be outlandish. So, I think it's all in the right direction.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. We'd not be having this conversation 5, 10, 15, and so on years ago.
Right. And every single thing that comes out in the past year, 2 years would be breaking news for multi-year. If we're talking 10, 15 years ago, like the pyramid video, that would have been breaking news for 2 years. Like we are so spoiled these days with good evidence that I think the tide is really turning. And Tom, how did you feel about the UAP report? And do you think, are you under that assumption as well?
Well, last night I started reading through all of it, word for word, everything. I'm going to post it today. I recorded a video of me reading it in case anybody just wants to listen to it instead of reading it. And I thought Chris Mellon actually summed it up best. Chris Mellon had written an article, and he stated, I have this is kind of funny, but he said the government again demonstrated its unique and uncanny ability to transform an inherently fascinating topic into vexing bureaucratic jargon. I feel as though there's a lot of wordplay, a lot of trickery, and I feel like it's up to us, again, to be reading between the lines. Unfortunately, we get put in this position time in and time out, but I do believe it's still overall a step in the right direction. It felt like a carbon copy of the first report with just some of the more updated information of how they're going to handle certain things.
Yeah, well, again, it kind of was.
It didn't feel like anything new, but I will say this. I feel that it's very telling that this report, after you go and read it, just remember that what you're reading was delayed from October. If this was all airborne trash and Chinese drones and that sort of thing, do you honestly think that the United States government would delay this report for that long? And do you believe that we would have new laws put into place to protect people that were witnesses to extraordinary phenomenon? Why would anybody be doing that if this was nonsense? So I feel like the overall general big picture is very telling as opposed to what's actually in the report.
Yeah. And again, with not whistleblower, because that's really not the right word.
Yeah.
That with the new language in the NDAA, again, people think that these witnesses are going to be able to go to the national, press, association and tell the story. No, it's behind closed doors in Congress. So, this is also going to be a process. People aren't just going to come out of the woodwork and start testifying, immediately. It's going to be a long process. But Vinnie, I know you're kind of keen on this. There are 8 people that are potentially testifying as soon as, now, is what we're hearing. Could you speak to any of that?
Well, I mean, if you see the latest interview with Gary Nolan, that I think I saw yesterday with Jay from Project Unity, he's aware of 3 people that have already testified to Congress behind closed doors. I say Congress, it may have been one of the committees, maybe one of the Intel committees or the Armed Services Committee, but it's going to the right people in the right place. So I'm excited if that's true. Again, a few people have said that in conversations that I've had. And so that's great. It's what we wanted. to a degree. We'd like it to be public, but there's nothing to stop them from opening this up to more public hearings sometime, maybe in the summer, like we had in May of 2022. You know, these things can run parallel to each other, and that may well happen. So, you know, fingers crossed we get to see more things publicly.
I would love another public hearing. Like I think that should be something that's also, you know, somehow worked into this where it's like mandatory almost. That would be really cool. Just so that we're all on the same page and we're all, you know, there's no if, ands, or buts, right? Like, yeah, have your classified versions or your classified sessions, or secret sessions, but you know, keep us involved because you know
Sure.
this topic affects every single person on the planet, not just one, two, or a group of folks. It's every single person. Now, you know, what are your thoughts on, you know, disclosure in general? Now, do you believe in what Lou Elizondo says, that it's already begun and it's a process? Or, you know, is disclosure something else to you?
I think it's still, I do agree with what Lou says, but it also, if you look at things that have been talked about for years, you know, there's two types of disclosure. There's the capital D and there's the small d. So yeah, I kind of believe we're in the small d disclosure. I never really subscribed to the idea that we would just suddenly get one day the president standing up in front of a podium announcing the existence of whatever, you know. I never,
Right.
So the big D disclosure, I never really kind of put much weight behind that. So yeah, I do think we're in the process, but also think that it's going to be quite a long process. Even, you know, if we get an acknowledgement to some degree of a genuine non-human intelligence, that the kind of leading into post-disclosure would be a very long process, as well as how we, as a society, as a race, deal with it, deal with the fallout, whether it affects, you know, religion, whether it affects financial institutions and the monetary systems. You know, there's so many consequences of what it could mean around the world. So it's going to be a lot of things to deal with, but I think we need that.
I do as well.
Agreed.
And Tom, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I feel like this process has been going on for a very long time now, and kind of have a feeling that because there are obviously individuals coming forward behind the scenes, word is getting out. Now, if you think about it, would one of these individuals who, you know, they're obviously remaining private, would they go and testify behind closed doors about Chinese lanterns? Like, they're obviously talking about something very significant. I have seen multiple video clips of representatives from our own government before they are briefed and after they're briefed. And there is a genuine physical change in their demeanor. So I think what could possibly happen at this point, because I agree with Vinny that we're in the small d disclosure. I don't subscribe to the other side of that either. Someone's going to come, someone's going to talk before one of these committees, Congress, etc. And there's going to be an individual that is in that room that says, you know, to hell with these laws. And they're going to tell somebody. I'm telling you, this is going to leak. It's too big. It is way too big. If someone walks into a room and starts talking about how they worked on reverse engineering craft that was created by non-human intelligence, someone in that room is going to talk.
Well, even, I mean, you got to think, like, if all of a sudden word got out Bob Lazar was going to testify in front of Congress.
Right, we talked about
just the
that, yep.
implication of
Mhm.
him putting himself on the line to testify in front of Congress, knowing that they would be able to find out the things that maybe we can't, right?
Right.
And check into his background.
Absolutely.
You know, that the implication on that alone would say a lot. So, you know, I think even tidbits like that, maybe not the session would leak or things said in the session would leak, but the implication, we already know Bob's story. We know what he's going to say. He hasn't changed it in 25 plus years.
Right.
So we know the story he's going to tell. We know the stories these people are going to tell, the ones that they're calling in, because for the most part, we've heard them. Robert Salas, right? Is it Mario Woods?
Yep.
Mario Woods. I know he's one of them. He admitted to being one of the 8 called in. Guys like Kevin Day, Commander Fravor, Ryan Graves, all these people, once they start, the trend starts being formed. Like, I mean, it's hard to look a Navy SEAL or a 20-year Navy veteran in the face and say, you're an idiot. You didn't see what you saw, especially when so many of them are saying the same thing. So I think, again, in a couple of years, we're going to be having even a more radical, different conversation.
Yeah, and the one thing I found interesting with what Gary Nolan was saying is that the 3 people he's aware of that have come forward so far are not prominent figures in the UFO world. They're not known in the UFO world, the UFO
Really?
community. Yeah,
Yep.
these are
And
genuine.
when did he say this?
It was in the interview. I think it was yesterday with Jay on Project Unity.
Yesterday.
Go and check it out.
He did one with
Yeah, I watched.
Project Unity.
And so that to me is quite telling, and I think probably in a way even more important than having the figures that we all know well,
yeah.
who I'd love to see subpoenaed and put in front of Congress. But at the same time, if there are people that have worked somewhere in these off the books special access programs, then within, I just love to knowing that. I think it's a really big telling thing,
Right. And all of this happening, right? All of this stuff is going on. Gary Nolan remains somewhat, becoming more of the face, right? Whereas Lou and guys like that stepped away. Gary Nolan is becoming a prominent figure amongst the UFO community. Uh, you know, what are your thoughts on what what he says? Do you take everything that he says to the bank as the credibility the guy has is, I mean, unmatched?
I wouldn't take it just on its own merits to the bank. I don't. In fact, I wouldn't take what anybody says to the bank. I think that's too much of a strong statement. But what I do is I'll listen to people and I'll speak to other people privately and kind of put these different things I hear together and see what picture forms out of the various pieces of information, and then I can kind of weigh up where it sits in my kind of. It's not a belief system. It's more just of where I put it in credibility rankings, let's say. And I'm good. I'm blessed to be in a position to have these kind of private conversations. And I think it's dangerous to say, in a way. I'm not saying you, or I think the community as a general is to put people in these positions saying they are the new face. They're just having the conversation, and they just
No, you're right.
Because I think it scares them away. We saw what happened to Lou. And I don't want that to happen again with anybody else. We need these people just as much. And I think that we need to focus on a collective, everyone, all of us that are involved in it together are making the difference, not just one or two individuals. So that's just how I look at things.
No, you're absolutely right. You're definitely, obvious, because there are others like Jacques Vallée, right?
Sure.
Who's been just part of this forever. Guys like Nick Pope just been around forever, but been around the block. And then, we got this gem in Lou Elizondo, and the toxicity of the community at points, drove him away. And that was such a tragic thing, because I think Lou was a dime a dozen, and his wealth of knowledge, it was there with us, and we just drove it away. And that was a very sad thing for me.
He's definitely still helping a lot quietly
behind the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, I spoke to him about an hour and a half ago before I came on here about the report. So yeah, I've got a quote, let's say, from him, which I'll be reading out on my next show later on today.
Okay.
So yeah, he's good, and yeah, things are good. He's just not in the public face. I don't want people to think that, oh, we need you back, Lou. It's like, well, just because he's not appearing on podcasts and stuff like that doesn't mean anything else has changed, because it certainly hasn't. It's still very much the gears are grinding behind the scenes. So that's a positive.
And do you think, so when I know I ask this to everyone, and it's always a very hard question. But when you think of the UFO phenomenon, what, with your best educated guess, what's going on? I ask everybody. I love to see their answers. Dimensional, interdimensional, all of the above, interplanetary. What would be your, if you had to put money on something, You know,
If I
what's
had to
going
put
on?
money on something, I would go more with the dimensional side of things rather than the traveling across the vastness of space at light speed or beyond. I don't subscribe to that as much these days. The extraterrestrial hypothesis again has slipped down, so it's more about, is it something that's been here on this planet, outside of our scope of vision for many years, even not before us, some kind of crypto terrestrial. That's certainly high up on the list,
Well,
let's say,
that's
for me. So whether that involves dimensions, time travel could play a part of it as well. So that's the kind of realm and area that I kind of have up here. But again, I still don't say definitively any of them because I just don't know. So I'm very careful and cautious not to bring that into my discussions that often. But as you asked, there you go. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
well, you know, there are like so for instance, there are people who practice CE5, right?
Sure.
And they claim, because I've never personally been able to achieve said interaction, they claim to be able to human initiated, incite human initiated contact with these beings, right? So those people are of the mindset they don't even care what the government's saying because they are, they have their own belief set in, like, I know that they think they're seeing this, they know they're seeing this, they have a level of confirmation, they don't need the government to say anything else. That's just, bullocks. So there's so many people that pay no attention, pay no mind to this side of things, and unfortunately I think that's gonna play a part sooner or later.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an area that I've really touched upon that much. I've got some very good friends involved with CE5 from the UK. I think you had her on recently, Holly Wood,
Holly,
doing
yes, oh
some
my
good
god,
work.
such a good friend.
Yeah, and then James Ian Doley from Engaging the Phenomena. He's very much into that aspect of the subject, as well as the government side. James kind of covers it all. He's really an amazing person. So I don't have a problem with that side of things. I have respect for people in all areas of the subject. The only issue I suppose I've ever had with anything to do with CE5 is when people claim, they kind of push it on people a little bit too
Right.
much. Like, oh, you're stupid, you should do this, and then you'd know. Like, I see that a little bit too often, and it's not from prominent figures; it's just from general stuff. I think that's the only downside. So, and that's a small thing, so it's not really a big deal.
Yeah, and unfortunately it's heavily associated with Dr. Greer, and
Mhm.
people have their opinions on Mr. Greer, so
Yeah.
I don't know where you end up on that spectrum, but I think, again, you said it earlier, I listen to everybody, and then you kind of just weed out, weed out the bullshit, and whatever you're left with, there's the truth, right? So with Greer, you kind of wade through a lot of what he says, and I think what he says is important. I think some of the stuff he's talking about is genuine, but I think somewhere along the line he lost his way, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
No, I agree completely. His early work back in 2001 with
Just
the Disclosure Project at the National Press Club was a great event. Bringing all those sort of military whistleblowers out was fantastic. And, since then, it seems to be a sliding scale down for me. His early documentaries, I thought, were quite good at the time. But, the more I learn about them and the way for example, the Atacama skeleton and how that all ended up with him slinging mud back at Gary Nolan when Gary Nolan did fair and honest scientific work on it, and he just didn't like the answers at the end of the day. So,
and I think attributed a lot. He was like, they're junk science. There was a lot of junk science words being thrown around, and I think that's what Greer does the best. Is Greer will out talk anybody.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? He'll beat you to death with words to a point you're like, I can't do it anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I can't do it, because he has something about him. Even when he was on the show with Dan and Kurt, right?
Yeah.
Like, they could barely get a word in edgewise. The guy just takes over, and people eat up what he says. I think in a culty way. It's sad to say. But
yeah, and I mean, he did an interview last week on again Jay from Project Unity, and he was alluding to having a hand in some of the work towards the UAP report, and it's like, No, you didn't.
No, you didn't. Stop.
Like,
He's always got to
Man,
insert
really?
himself in everything.
Oh,
Like,
He
did
really
you ever
does.
notice that about Greer? He always has to be in. Like, he's somehow a part of every major thing.
Yeah.
Like,
has to insert himself into every
Even-
conversation.
no, not even that. Like, if it was that, it's different. He's inserting himself into places. that
Yeah,
he
it's
never-
worse actually. He's,
Yeah, that he
he's
never was, like-
claiming that he's a part of something in the behind the scenes, and then everyone that's involved with it is like,
For
I've never even met him.
for the most famous being, he placed himself in the middle of the Wilson Davis situation, saying that
Ugh.
he had briefed Admiral Wilson prior to this meeting. And like then Admiral Wilson obviously denied the so it's his word against his, but it's the guy always has to be involved in everything. So
Yeah.
there's just some weird stuff going on there. But I think this community could do it really is a good thing. It's a good community. It's just the people like Greer, I think they'll be weeded out eventually.
Yeah, I agree. And I just will always reiterate to people that the more we come together and work together, the more things get done. We see it here in the UK. I'm so glad to be on a part of UAP Media UK with the team we have, with the author and researcher Graham Rendell and Dave, who used to run Shadows of Your Mind magazine. We have Andy and Dan from that UFO podcast. We now have Ryan Sprague, as he's now an honorary member. And then also Dr. David Clark, who I was honored to work with on the release of the Calvin photograph last year. And again, working together, and then such great friends over in the US, some really, really amazing researchers who are just there for each other and treat each other with respect, and things get done. There's no time for drama in this community, and even though it's always there, it's best avoided, in my opinion, to keep the work moving forward.
Amen.
For sure. And UAP, like what you guys have been doing, creating that network of people, I think is so genuine and such a it's almost like your own To the Stars Academy, and just in a different way, right? And it's in a different way. Of course, I'm not comparing them, but
we didn't promise any spaceships.
Yeah, you didn't. Yeah, emails to Podesta.
No, afraid not. No.
What do you make of To the Stars? Speaking of that, and what happened with To the Stars? Because there was such potential with To the Stars Academy. I was so enthralled by it, and then Trump won, and just the whole thing fizzed out. So
yeah, things change. Things they had, what they set out to do originally it all sounded almost
brilliant.
too good. Yeah, like really too good to be true. And then we saw, with the Unidentified TV series, and that sort of came out of their stables, let's say. And then it all sort of fizzled out pretty quickly through the early days of the pandemic, and we saw people leave and start going off in their own direction. And at least the work continued from those guys. Tom DeLonge obviously pretty much disappeared from the community, and we see him every now and again talking about it on UFO Twitter, and I'm always keeping my eye and ear on what he's discussing when he does pop up every now and again. I think
more or less just like share stuff with like a winky face.
Yeah, in the odd interview though, he does talk about some things where it makes you think, like, it sounds like he genuinely does know something that I want to know. And so, it is what it is. They did their thing. They separated. Do I think it was a big CIA psyop? I don't think that. But again, I can't prove it either way. But then nobody else can. And there are people out there who probably say, yeah, but we can prove it. And let's just get over it and get past it, because it's not going to help the subject go any further, I think.
Right.
So
it's not going to advance it. And I believe he's still working on the Secret Machines film, right?
I believe it's going to be a TV series, the last I heard. I think.
Oh, okay. Well,
series,
yeah. Regardless, so To the Stars kind of became more of a media, network instead of what it was originally. The Science Arts Academy, which is there's just a complete difference, and I think Halpinoff shared that recently, that there's a complete difference now. Like, and they know that, like, it was purposely done after, they no longer were in the position they could be in with if Hillary had won. So I
Yeah.
think, I think everything happens for a reason, and it's in someone else's hands. I mean, what are your thoughts? Could could uh, could what people like John Ramirez and guys like that say are true? That something's on its, something's coming, and something's forcing the government to reveal more. What are your thoughts on those more obscure kind of stories?
I mean, yeah, I
You know,
like John Ramirez is a nice guy. I like him. Go on.
did
Sorry.
you hear the 2027 thing?
I did. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yep.
like, in reference to something like that, what do what I don't really hear your thoughts too much on these kind of things, but I know it's a little obscure, but where do you lie on those situations?
I really do struggle with predictions.
Timetables
things are,
specifically.
things are going to happen on this date in this year, and I really struggle with that. Not to say I completely brush it aside and pay it no attention. I just have to take it, put it on that shelf, that slightly obscure shelf to the side, and always keep an eye on it and cross-reference it if I see other people talking about similar things. But it's certainly not a focal point of research for me, because how do you research something that's supposedly meant to happen in the future? So yeah, I mean, like John said some interesting things in the last year or two since he kind of came on the scene. But again, you have to take everything, not just from John, but with people like that, with a pinch of salt. And so just be cautiously aware of the way that you interpret what they say. And it's like, I think sometimes we see people say, right, well, this is going to happen because he said it, and he would know because he was da 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 da. And I struggle with that as well. And
Well, I mean, if you think about it, though, like, it does line up with Lou Elizondo's kind of timeline, if you will, as well.
You can
There
piece
are
them together.
coincidences.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. And again, like, it all looks and sounds great when you put them together with people from like Jim Semivan as well, saying very similar things. So yeah, it looks and sounds great, but without any way of proving it, it just has to remain on the sideline for now.
Yeah, it's just mere speculation and
Yeah.
talk, and talk is kind of cheap, I guess.
It's difficult because I want to believe all of it, because it's all so brilliant and weird and wonderful. But as a serious, I try to be serious. I try to not let my brain overtake or my heart overtake. I don't know which way around. I try and stay analytical and skeptical in the right kind of way, and just let research and data do the talking.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to do it. And I know, Tom, I know you had some questions. I want to make sure you get those in as well. So, here, you got the floor for a sec.
So, I guess, Vinny, what I want to ask you is, based on where everything is right now, what are you keeping your eyes on the closest right now? Obviously, the report's out. We have the witnesses testifying, but I mean, I guess, what's really grabbing your attention more than anything right now? And what do you think people in the chat that are listening to the show, what do you think people should be focused on right now?
I'd say try not to focus on just one thing. It's better to look at every avenue that's happening, side by side. You've got the government aspect. It's very slow. We probably won't get a lot, certainly not in a hurry. But then you've got people like Professor Avi Loeb in the Galileo project. They've not been going that long, but, Avi's very confident that they'll have data in 2023. So that's great. We've got a lot of citizen science, a lot of good researchers going out and doing boots on the ground work. I think that's always good. It only takes one case to come from somewhere like that, from a citizen, to really change the conversation overnight, even if it's really compelling. So look everywhere. Look everywhere. Don't settle for one thing and just be laser focused on that, because you might miss what's going on in the peripherals.
I think that's a great way of looking at it.
And thank you, Christian. Sorry to cut you off. Thank you,
go ahead.
Christian Thompson. I don't know what that form of money is. What is
Denmark?
I thought that was Donkey Kong. Like, I I thought I just got 20 Donkey Kong coins or
Some
something.
Nintendo dollars.
Yeah. Oh man. Vinnie is the man. Go follow Disclosure Team.
Thank you, Christian.
With 20 Denmark dollars, 20 Donkey Kong coins. Thank you so much, Christian. That was amazing. Brilliant. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, since we're talking about evidence and work being done, boots on the ground. Well, did you? I'd imagine you probably did. What do you make of all the rumors out there about significant pieces of evidence that are related to the Virginia incident, like the work that James Fox has been doing?
Oh God,
Well, I mean, James believes it exists. I've spoken to James, obviously on the show I did, and then
put in a good
spoken to
word.
James privately, and he's convinced that the footage exists. He's spoken to people, and
he's putting up how much money? 10 grand?
More than, I think it's a lot more than
Way
that.
more than that.
Yeah,
Maybe it's 100,000.
Yeah, it's like
something
100.
like that. Yeah,
It's a lot.
So I can't say too much more than that. Really, I'll let James do the talking, and if we see anything come out, great. If we don't, it's okay. I'm not gonna. James hasn't promised anything. He's promised that he will do his best to get it, but it's all down to the people that have the evidence, if it exists. So
Right.
I'd love to see it.
Adam in the chat actually has a great question that I think I'm gonna throw this at Vinny. How do you feel about the abduction phenomenon experiencers, people that claim to have maybe been taken aboard a spacecraft, even piloted it, have had eggs removed, the hybridization program? Do you think there's any validity to any of those topics?
I'll say it like this. I don't necessarily mean there's no validity to it. And it's not really a case of me believing about abductions. It's more, I've spoken to abductees and that, and I believe that they believe what happened to them is real.
Yeah.
And I take myself out of that equation because it's not for me to judge or kind of say whether it's true or not. If they believe it, then it happened to them. Then that's enough for me. Not to, and I don't necessarily then believe abductions are real, but it's such a sensitive area of the subject that is really not kind of my area. I've got some good friends who do deal with that aspect of the phenomena, and I think that we have to tread really carefully when it comes to that, because there are a lot of people who unfortunately in the community may have mental health issues. Now, I'm not saying that abductees have mental health issues. I'm not saying that at all, and this is why it's a very sensitive subject, because I don't want to be misquoted in any way, but you have to kind of be cautious and respectful of people and their beliefs and their experiences. So it's kind of all I can really say about it. I know that seems like a bit of I've sidestepped the question, but
you literally,
not at all.
John Mack felt the exact same way you did, where he said that these people, whether or not this happened the way they say it happened to us, to them, it happened.
Yeah.
And the PTSD and the tremors and all the symptoms are there, right? As if something did happen. So like there is something to it, like, whether it's mental health, and we talked about this the other night, mental health and
we did.
the UFO community. It does attract a certain, no, not to point anyone out or any type of group out, but it does attract a little bit of more of a obscure and out there crowd, just naturally. And I don't know, this brings up the paranormal and Skinwalker Ranch and where UFO and paranormal meet, but then this giant phenomenon is there, right? So I mix in the paranormal and the UFO topic together a lot of times. So there's a giant community of people that mental illness is something, sadly, that it does exist.
Sure. And I mean, the other thing I suppose you could say about the abduction phenomena is, could this be a non-human intelligence physically abducting someone? Yeah, it could be. Could it be them psychologically affecting someone to believe that they're being taken physically? It could be that. It could be a numerous amount of things. And because we just don't know or have the answers to that, again, you have to keep all things on the table and bear them all in mind, So that's how I see it.
Speaking of that, the paranormal and Skinwalker Ranch and things like that. I know you know, but are there connections in the to the paranormal from the UFO world? Do you think that they're somehow entangled?
Yeah, over the last few years, I've seen those two worlds collide a hell of a lot more than I did previously. I don't know what the link is. I don't know how to interpret it, but it does seem to make sense that there is, that intermingling of things that could both be the same or similar phenomena. So yeah, I can't dismiss it as being, well, no, that's this and that's that. I'm a lot more open-minded to more things at the moment. And again, until we can prove anything, I'm not going to say yes or no. It's possibilities.
Yeah, because for me, like we've talked about on here on the show, like LSD,
Okay.
or LSD, DMT, and the relation, and I I know who Graham Hancock is, and I know that his work,
Sure.
but definitely would love to talk about that as well. But what about if the chances are that these drugs, maybe not LSD as much, but DMT get us closer, mushrooms get us closer to this veil that you can, then all of a sudden we can perceive things that we didn't before. And could that be some sort of limbo place that these beings inhabit and can, a lot of people talk about seeing UFOs kind of phase in on themselves or collapse in on themselves. For me, what that sounds like is it's leaving this dimension, right? It's not blasting off, it's folding into space and time, right? So, I mean, I think the truth is so much more complex than we could even fathom.
Yeah.
Right? Like down the rabbit hole you go. Because if any of it's true, as is what I say, if any of it's true, it could all be true at that
Sure.
point.
Why not?
Right?
And yeah, and you mentioned DMT there, and if I've spoken to people who've had experiences on ayahuasca, and there are scientific studies being done around these kind of hallucinogens and I hate the word drugs, but I guess that's what I'm trying to say is that the brains have been looked at of these people, and there are interesting developments. And I'm not going to claim to know anything about the in-depth science when it looks at these studies, because I don't. But I think it's worth looking at and bearing in mind. Could these substances open up, like you said, that veil that's outside of our everyday five senses? Could it be showing us something that is genuine and exists? Possibly, yeah. And I find that really exciting. Now, I did have the opportunity to do an ayahuasca ceremony in Colombia last year, which I turned down. I was just not in the right place. I'm sure I may have the opportunity again this year. So, we'll see.
Oh my God. You're going, trust me, I would love to have a conversation with you after that.
Yeah.
We can have a whole bit on it. But
it's worth it, my friend.
It is. When I say this, the next day, or once you're done, like you'll look at the tree and the grass and the sky, and you'll know why it's there, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's not every day that we think about that. Think about this. Think about the paradise that we've been given, that we take for granted every single day. A lot of us, humans, we talk about the afterlife and paradise. We live in paradise.
Sure.
Right now. Look at how beautiful this pale blue dot is. How vastly different and just absolutely gorgeous this thing called life is. Yeah. Right? And it's just there's so much more to it. And I think these experiences with ayahuasca or DMT, I think they do give you they unlock some part of you that is connected to everything else. It's hard to explain to someone who hasn't done it.
No, I totally understand. Like I said, I've spoken to many people who have, and I'm very familiar with the experiences and the vast array of
just don't be scared.
Learning. I mean, it's certainly not a case of being scared. It's a case of, I'm certainly not in a place in my life where I'm searching for anything internal. So I'm not looking for answers about my life, because I'm in a very, very good place in my life now that I don't necessarily want that to change. I don't want to be. I don't want to be.
Well, be prepared to learn a little bit about yourself, because
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's all good.
when you're in there, when you're in there, you find out some stuff about yourself, whether you
Sure.
want to or not, and it's a good thing. It's a
Yeah,
great
no,
thing.
absolutely. So, I mean, I'm never saying never say never is what I'm saying. So we'll see.
It's a very
And
powerful experience.
yeah, and I think cases, when we look at, I want to bring this up because you talked earlier about Colombia and just South America, that whole area, and how it's kind of built into their everyday, right?
Sure. Yeah.
There's areas in South America where it's culturally just something that exists.
Yeah.
Now, when you're down there, what's it like compared to? Because I've never been there myself. What's it like to talk to someone who has never lived with that stigmatization, and do you think that countries like that should be paid more attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I think, because you have so many locals in the communities that have had their own experiences and they're just not afraid to talk about it. That's great. But then they also tell stories of ancestors and ancestral stories. So you can really find a connection between modern day UFO incidents and ancient history. I found that connection for the first time because I always struggled between the ancient alien theory, let's say, and modern ufology. I never found a connector. But when I was in Colombia, I found that because of these people talking so openly and so freely and so honestly about their own experiences, their family members, and historical incidents through their families and local cultural stories, let's say. So I think it should definitely be paid attention to, and we could certainly learn a thing or two in the UK and the US.
Now, do you think now with the Anunnaki and these kind of stories that are told in the ancient alien hypothesis, or the, let's call it the ancient astronaut hypothesis, do you have that? Do you have a hard time subscribing to that aspect of it? That there could be, that we could be engineered by some sort of alien race, or is it just that story in particular?
I mean, with anything that's sort of so far back in ancient history, yeah, any of them are possible. Of course, they could have happened, because how do we prove that it didn't, or did or didn't?
Right.
But that's kind of the point. I can't research that. I
It's
can't
so hard to
research
talk about
thousands of
too,
years
yeah.
ago. So what am I going to do? I could visit all the ancient sites in the world, and that'd be great. But I couldn't really
But you didn't
then
have,
come away with an answer. I go, okay,
yeah.
they all look like they're telling a story, but where's the evidence and data and proof? So that's where I struggle with just focusing on that aspect of the subject. So,
Well, that's where I think Graham Hancock comes in,
sure.
because the story that he doesn't necessarily speak about aliens. Like that's not what his thing is. It's a cataclysm that happened here and wiped out an advanced civilization, right?
Yeah.
So does that tie into any of this? And I think that could be a very, very, very what's the word I'm looking for? It could be very plausible that is the case.
I think the way that you could tie that together would be an ancient lost advanced civilization could be behind the phenomena that we see and hear about today.
Right.
Look at the mythology stories around Atlantis and the the crystal energy power and stuff that they all had with advanced technology. If that was lost, could some of it have survived? Of course, why not? So yeah, that could be a connection. I'm always open-minded, but it's
Well, to go on further with it, do you think there's a problem in mainstream archaeology to accept the fact that this could that Graham might not be out of his mind?
Well, we've seen the problem. They're just very stubborn and stuck in their ways. We see it in many aspects of education. History seems to have been written, and some people say, well, look, history's been written, we cannot change that. Well, of course we can, as we learn and discover new things that we may have been wrong about in the past. But some people are afraid to to go down that direction. You know, we saw the backlash to Graham Hancock's recent series, The Ancient Apocalypse.
Yeah.
You
Very
know,
much
there was
so.
a huge backlash from mainstream academia in some degrees and archaeology. But you know, we need to break down these walls and barriers that are thrown up by those kind of people. So,
But it just goes to show you how far we've come in the UAP field,
absolutely,
right? That even in mainstream archaeology, Graham can hit a wall like that with you know, and we're advancing the way we are in our own specific topic and field,
sure.
and you know, consider us lucky. But you know, I do have a question. If you know, the U.S. government, as of right now, considers the beginning of the phenomenon to all, you know, for the most part, the 2004 Nimitz incident, right? As far as they're concerned, or at least as far as I can see, the starting date that they're targeting is that incident in 2004, and they don't want to go back any further. Do you think that is because they don't want to ever answer those questions, and we won't ever get answers to those questions?
I
And we'll
think it
have to
was.
meet them, like, kind of like in the middle, if we want to progress.
I think it was convenient back in sort of 2020, 2021, when we first saw the initial 180-day countdown, you know, and Congress actually mandating the DOD and the Pentagon to actually do something and come up with some information, collaborate with the military branches and the intel community to actually tell us what you know. And they obviously never followed through. They
Right.
started, I think, at the Nimitz because it was, you know, this big military case where they could kind of speak to the witnesses. They could speak to the pilots and everything. We know Fravor and Alex Dietrich have spoken to Congress behind closed doors.
Yes.
What I'm really happy to see is this year's National Defense Authorization Act going. Now they're mandating them to go back to 1945. And that's amazing to see, because then we get to see, you know, which, you know, I assume is going to be talking about the Trinity crash of 45 that Jacques Vallée writes about in his book. But then obviously that includes Roswell and all the other big cases. So they are now going, right, enough's enough. Tell us what you know. And if there have been legacy programs dating back to the 50s and 60s where people have attempted to work on any kind of downed craft, then these may be the whistleblowers that are coming forward behind closed doors now that we don't know.
Right.
Or something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, for you, you know, where do you see, you know, where do you see this language taking us? Do you think it takes us to that? Because you have to think. So out of the UFO disclosure process, if we're in a small disclosure, right? You know, what's the next big shoe that's going to drop? Well, if I had my guess, it would be some sort of reverse engineering program.
Yeah.
Like, that would be the next biggest thing to drop, right? The biggest information, you know, to the public, like that we have had craft retrieval programs, and that we have attempted reverse engineering. And yes, some of our technology has been derived from that. I think if that comes out, then it's a whole different ball game. You know, it's a whole, we're talking, I mean, that's confirmation in itself, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, great work is being done.
Yeah,
on looking into this.
Capital D disclosure, if you ask me, because if they've retrieved craft that aren't from this world, there you go. There it is. So whistleblowers, not whistleblowers, I hate calling them that, but
yeah, it's kind of the word we kind of have to use, because it's easy to kind of put them in that
concocted
spot.
into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that could be the next shoe to drop. I'm you know, what are your insights on the whole Avi Loeb, you know, public crash retrieval program that they've been talking about, which is kind of a weird thing to talk to even mention.
Do you mean this expedition he's doing to retrieve the object from the bottom of the Pacific?
Yeah. So I know it's not a UFO crash retrieval program that's, you know, but I mean, it's like he had you know, said on a couple shows, like, if it's a UFO, it's, you know, because that's who Avi Loeb is. That's who he is. So they have this retrieval program with Project Galileo, and like that now with the James Webb Space Telescope making all these incredible discoveries. For me, what I think is going to happen is a combination of that plus whatever's retrieved in this Galileo project. Could it be used? Could they find a craft and, all of a sudden that's the starting point, right?
Yeah, I think what was interesting when the Galileo project first started was that they had their 3 different areas that they were looking into. They were looking for genuine UAP in up in the sky. They were looking at things near to Earth, and then they were looking out into sort of deep space. And with the work that Avi did with the discovery of Oumuamua, then this object, if he's right, he believes it's come from interstellar space and crashed somewhere on Earth, and they retrieve it, and it's some kind of space rock. We could learn a lot from it because of its makeup, because it's it's very rare we see these objects making their way into our solar system. So we could learn more about the Oumuamua side of things, more so than UAP, which is kind of more interesting to me personally. But it's all part of the same kind of big picture study. Learning about space and all that kind of stuff is good as well. So yeah, I mean, hats off to Avi for doing these multiple kind of avenues and researches. So yeah, great. We'll see what happens, and I'm all for it.
Yeah. I mean, imagine like this one. So imagine it's announced though that Avi has discovered some sort of like spaceship or alien satellite,
Cool.
and like all of a sudden, boom, it's right there, right? And then, but my fear is if something like that were to happen, that the government would then say, no, we just found out about it with you guys. This is the first thing we've ever found. And then everything to date would be null and void. They, because they would be like, no, we just found out. This is the first thing we've ever found. So
it's not going to stick.
Yeah, that won't stick, because people will be like, these whistleblowers, I keep calling them, but these people who may have worked on legacy programs will be like, well, it doesn't matter if I speak now, because it's there,
Yeah, right. So. And yeah, the nuclear connection, I think is I think it's so apparent that it's if you don't think there's a connection between UFO or UAP and nuclear technology or water, then I think you're mistaken in a way. Just we got to wrap up in a few, but could you speak on that? Like guys like Robert Salas and their testimony, right? That clearly a message is being sent, and I mean the spike from you talk about Roswell. You're going there soon, so I mean, give us a little discussion about that.
Yeah, I think whatever you think about the nuke connection, it seems to be a lot more than just a coincidence that these things were spotted a lot more during the initial times when we were testing nuclear weapons and then using them back in the 40s. Yeah, and it's Robert Salas. He seems like a credible guy, and I'd love to see him testify in front of Congress.
Oh
but
yeah,
there's a lot more out there, isn't there? We've seen and heard from a few, and a lot of great work has been done on the subject. Robert Hastings has done some great work on the subject. So yeah, it really does point in that direction that there is something. Whether there's a message, I'm a bit more skeptical about, but it just indicates that there is some interest in our development and advancement of weapons and technology of that sort.
Yeah, and I mean, like they said, Adam said Roswell was the first, the first place with the group of atomic bombers.
509th.
The 509th, yeah, which was the first atomic equipped bombing squadron. And it's all there, right? Like, and then it's just all there. The spikes of sightings, correlate with the advent and increase in nuclear energy and technology in weaponries, unfortunately. So I think it's no doubt that there's a possibility that there's something that's keeping an eye on us, saying like, look at these apes with thermonuclear weapons. Look at these idiots. Like, what are they doing? And we get that, right, from cases like the aerial school, right, where there's always in a lot of these sightings near nuclear installations, the message is always that we need to protect our planet, and we're doing destruction to it, and nuclear technology needs to be thrown away, or at least halted in the advancement of weaponry. So, you know, there's clear indicators for me that that's something. There's a tie there.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's different levels of how far you take that based on how much you want to believe. The belief system can play a part in that, but there are stories where people have said, that nuclear weapons can have effects through dimensions.
Dimensions.
Yes.
Of course.
I love
don't know,
that you said this. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
I was just thinking this too. I'm
if
glad
you
you
go
brought that
if
up.
you go to that point, it is a possibility. Again, it can't be proven at this point. Could it be proven? Do we know that? Do the government know something about that? Maybe they do. Maybe this is. So again, there's so many ways you can speculate about the involvement between UFOs and nukes, and it's a fascinating aspect of the phenomena. So, yeah, certainly is interesting.
Yeah, and even Russia can't blow nukes. The tests are failing these days. Not saying it's UFOs, but it is weird that that a nation like that is having an issue right now, splitting the atom. And then Adam said, "Didn't Russia just shoot down a UFO?"
Yeah,
Did you hear that story?
I did. Yeah, I heard someone tell me that it was a missile tip that had just come off after
Yeah,
a missile was fired, and I'm going to go with the prosaic on that one. I'm afraid.
Agreed.
People will say anything.
It was clickbait headlines that really threw the story into the consciousness of everyone, and it's a dangerous game when that happens. So,
and I always say, like these ones right here, the Maelstrom, Holloman, Wright Pat. Oh, but speaking of O'Hare, the guy from Tim Price, I believe.
Not familiar.
Maybe it's.
I know the
Tim
case. I'm not sure of the name.
From the debrief, Chris.
Maybe Chris Plain.
Yeah. Maybe it was Chris Plain. I don't know if it was Chris Plain. I might be getting this wrong, but someone said that there is more information about to drop that does not negate. They wouldn't say that it proves, but it's not to debunk the O'Hare incident. Like new evidence is about to come out. So
that'd be fascinating.
That would be so fascinating. And I've always said that the Holloman Air Force Base landing footage, if it's real, that would be the Holy Grail.
Yeah,
it would be.
That would be the Holy Grail if it exists. And
a lot of people seem to think it does. Christopher Sharp has been talking about it a lot lately, saying he's got people behind the scenes that are like, "Yep, it happened."
Well, I mean, you guys, and then Robert Emenegger, was like certain, after years and years of looking into it and being involved in that, that it was a genuine thing. Before we go, that would be the last thing. Like that footage is something I hold high in my book of like would love to see. Right? What's your take on that case?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got 8 seconds publicly that we have of that video, and I see it every now and again, and I look at it and think, if you think about the way it was described as coming over the range before lowering down, and if all of that footage does exist, then I mean that's going to be spectacular if we get to see that. And then we can get a lot of these people to do really good analysis on it. It could really blow this thing wide open. This is what we want. We want more credible investigative work and stuff. So bring it on.
Or even the 23-minute video that Elizondo had spoken of. That apparently at points you could potentially see occupants. So I think that is if these videos ever surface, my oh my, are we in for a treat?
It's game over at that point.
Do you think there'd be mass hysteria if this was dropped on people? That I always ask this to people. I did forget to ask you, but for the intro clip, do you think that if disclosure legitimately happened, right, in a way that was uncontrolled, not controlled by the government, that there would be mass panic and hysteria?
There could be certain, people in certain countries of a certain mindset that would panic, purely because of they probably always thought that this was just something out of the movies, and that, the movies have portrayed visitors as being particularly hostile over, that's generally how they're portrayed. And so, it wouldn't surprise me if we see certain areas of society really do struggle with this kind of new paradigm,
Right.
But I think, we're a resilient bunch as humans. Let's give ourselves some credit. We will bounce back from whatever happens post-disclosure, in my opinion.
I do. I think so
Agreed.
too. And Tom, what do you have any other final questions before we get wrapped up?
Well, because I've been seeing it in a couple of different places. Vinnie, where do you think we're going to be 1 year from now?
Oh God.
Wow. I still think we're going to be doing what we've been doing. We may have a little bit more to play on and to play with. It'd be nice to see more videos, whether they come from official channels or leaked. It'd be nice to know a bit more about things like Wilson Davis, maybe some leaks on legacy programs. It's really hard to say. Obviously, I want to say it'll be amazing. We'll have this, and this, but I also want to be realistic and just say, whatever happens, I'm going to keep doing what I do and speaking to the people I speak to. And yeah, that's all I can say, because I don't want to jinx it.
I don't want to jinx it either. All of a sudden, we become John Ramirez, and we're putting dates on things. But
Sure.
I would love to have you back on the show as you're super, just the initial conversation. Some getting all that stuff out of the way is always good. So then we
Sure.
can jump into some more obscure stuff and phenomenology. You said season 2 is coming. Where can people find you? I did post your link in the description, and I put your Twitter right below your name tag there.
Sure.
But where can people find you and keep the conversation going?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm on all major social media platforms, but I suppose I'd say primarily Instagram and Twitter. Obviously, I do the YouTube show, so people find me there. But the best thing is, like you said, go into the all my links, Disclosure Team link in the description, and you'll see everything that I've been involved with and that I've got coming up, whether it be the conferences, phenomenology, and all the things I just mentioned. Yeah, it's the best way to do it. Go and find me there.
All right. Thank you so much, man. And Tom, where can they find you to keep the conversation going, brother?
Well, you guys can primarily find me on Twitter, Atomic Thomas, but change the O's to zeros. And then, of course, I'm very active on YouTube. My channel means everything to me. I hope to have both of you gentlemen on my show at some point. And I just want to say, Vinnie, just because I've been following you for a while, it's been an honor and a pleasure talking to you today. This was fantastic.
Yeah, that was really good conversation, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can get super creepy with it next time. Not creepy, but we can go occult. We can do so many things.
Oh, let's do it.
The topic set here is just so vast, and I've got Catalina on my mind right now, so I'm a little taken out. I've been doing so much work on this project, and I really can't wait to see how it turns out. And I hope you both like it and enjoy it as well.
I'm sure we will. I'm
Looking
sure
forward to it.
Yeah. And who knows? Imagine all of a sudden I got smoking gun footage. Just kidding.
Oh my God.
I did get in contact, by the way, with what is her name? She did Terror in the Sky.
Caroline Corey?
Yeah, she reached out to me.
Oh wow.
And gave me a bunch of advice on equipment and stuff like that. I'm not like a huge fan of her, but I have much respect for what she did.
Caroline's awesome. Yeah. The one person I would recommend, I'd recommend reaching out to Britt Barbieri. She's done a lot of research going out to Catalina. She works really
I want to get someone on camera to like sit down for an interview. I have a couple locals that have agreed to do so.
Cool.
But I want to get some researchers and people that have done research into it as well.
Yeah, Brittany's done a lot of work we works really closely with Ben.
Maybe you can help me
sure.
Get in touch if that'd be okay with you, because it'd be such a help. And Astral said he's gonna help me with the music. So
nice.
So I think it's
gonna be with that too.
Yeah, it's gonna be I hope it comes together really well, and I'm super excited about it. And I'm super excited. You got things going on, and you got so much going on, and just again, I cannot say, as a person who also has been watching you for quite some time and following you, thank you for all the work that you've done so far and
Thank you.
the credibility that you and the people like you keep bringing to the conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time, next Sunday, with our guest, which we'll announce this Monday. But for the meantime, I'll be headed out to Catalina, so not many no shows this week on YouTube or anything. So we will see you soon next Sunday. Everyone, I love you. Keep your eyes to the sky, and we'll see you next time.